infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
On this episode of Into the Fray, I welcome Jeff on with me, and he sent along not only his encounter via email, but also some helpful maps and diagrams, and even, I don't know, Jeff, how you created that image of the actual thing that you finally eventually saw, but I do appreciate all of that information that you sent along, and welcome on to the show.
It's nice to be here. That one, the picture that is of the thing that I saw, was created. My job is doing AI artwork and real artwork and everything imagery for a marketing department. So that's totally faked and completely created. And it's not exactly what I saw. It's like if you were closer to what I saw and my imagination playing into what that might have looked like. It was really from, if people go in and look at that image, and you can use those images, you can put them up on your thing or however you say it, but it would have been from way further back, nowhere near that clear. Yeah, so yeah, that's kind of the thing.
Yeah, it's quite the experience, and I wanted to ask you before we dive into this, because this did happen when you were 15. And you're on a little vacation with your family. A whole bunch of you guys went to this location. Were you or your cousin, because your cousin was there with you for this experience, were you guys aware in any way, shape, or form of Bigfoot prior to this?
Just from things on television, and I didn't really watch a whole lot of that. I mean, it was fun to watch In Search of, and I remember the movie. Oh, what's the old movie? I can't even think of it now.
The Legend of Boggy Creek?
I didn't go see it. Yes. And back in the day, I did not go to the movie theaters to see it. It was something I watched as streamed on something later. But yeah, I'd heard of it, but not really paid much attention to it. We hunted and fished a lot, and we were campers, and we were kind of a middle-class family. And when we went on vacations, we went camping. And this time we were going up to one of the biggest camping trips my dad and his brothers ever concocted together. And they rented a huge houseboat. And we were going up into an area that's known, I don't know if it's officially called this, but it's known to that area as the Land of 1,000 Lakes. And it is northeast of Lake Superior, and it is right on the Canadian border. And one of those pictures that I sent you is kind of a map of it. It is literally a maze of lakes and channels and little islands and peninsulas. And yeah, we took this huge houseboat that was kind of rickety when you first look at it. Me and my cousin thought it was the coolest thing ever because we were 15, but this houseboat, literally, it reminded you of like just a trailer on pontoons with kind of a deck on the front and a deck on the top and two motors on the back. But yeah, it was, and I remember the ride up there, we had to camp in Minnesota at I don't know if anybody remembers that. They probably still exist, the KOA campgrounds. That's where we stopped on our way overnight. And when we were there, we were close and actually drove through the next day, the Superior National Forest through there. And this was the biggest, I'd never seen woods like this, being a kid from kind of rural northern Indiana. Looking into this woods was like akin to the very first time somebody might look at the ocean or something. It's like you realize, you get that kind of feeling in your stomach. My gosh, there's not really another side to this when you're looking into the ocean for the first time. And that's the way these woods were. They were huge and deep and dark. And I just never seen anything quite like that. Me and my cousin just thought this boat was really cool, but it was actually, like I said, kind of old and rickety. And our families we had brought two boats with us. It was like a larger kind of fishing boat, and then this little kind of a flat bottom aluminum boat that just had a little like 5-horse hand tiller engine on the back of it. And that was going to be me and my cousin's plaything on the lake. And everybody that was with us, let's see, it was both my uncles, my grandma and grandpa, both my aunts, my mom and dad, my 2 sisters, and my cousin. And we would be towing these 2 extra boats behind the large houseboat. And when we got to the place where we actually picked up the houseboat, there was this really cool old guy. Don't remember his name. I don't remember the name of the place we got the boat from either, but him and my uncles were talking about how to navigate the lake. And inside the houseboat, one of the cabinet doors, I remember, was this old map just kind of plastered to the front of the cabinet door. And it was kind of a map of the lakes and where all these buoy markers were that you were supposed to follow, because once you got back in there wasn't a whole lot of places to get fuel, like 3 or 4 places, and they were all on the American side. One thing I didn't mention, once you got in there, some of these lakes and channels, some of the bigger sections of it were right on the Canadian border. It's like the southern shoreline was the US and the northern shoreline was Canada. And it was all large growth, deep woods, especially on the Canadian side. And I remember when my dad said something to the guy about the extra boats and towing them, this old guy, he looked right at me and my cousin when he said this, and he said, never take that boat out of eyesight of the houseboat. He said that people get lost, and there's been several times people have had to been rescued from these areas because they can't find their way back. And if you Google Earth this area, this Thousand Lakes area northeast of Lake Superior, you can see what he's talking about. That's the area we were in. It's a maze. And yeah, so and we had to follow these buoys and this map on this door, because back then there was no GPS, there was no cell phones. You had basically paper maps, and that's about it. There was a radio, an old radio that kind of reminded you of the old CB home base unit radios in the houseboat, and it was to communicate with some of these small marinas, the few places to get gas, so people would not get stranded. So after all was said and done, we were there and we bought groceries and dropped the boats into the water at the little boat ramp that was there. And so we kind of set off to do our big fishing trip on our little floating trailer park home we had there. And like had been saying, that I had never been to any kind of forest like this. I had been to a few state parks and stuff like that, but in Indiana, when you would look into a forest or a woods, we called them the woods in Indiana, and you would always be able to see speckles of light coming through from the other side of the woods. And if you couldn't, you knew that you could just walk in a straight line and you would hit a farmer's field, or you would hit a country road or something like that. But this place was not like that. To kind of explain what kind of wilderness this place was, when me and my cousin would get the little boat down, once we were back in there and fishing, and a few days later we would get the boat down and be putting around on our little aluminum boat. And at one point we saw a pack of wolves. It looked like maybe 9 or 10 wolves running along the bank of one of the shorelines, and we were probably 200 yards out into the water, running along the bank for probably 15 seconds. and then they just turned and just bounded back into the woods. I mean, the most of the shorelines on these lakes had big boulders on them, and they were just lighting across the tops of these boulders like it was a ninja movie, and they just like they'd done it a million times and just bounced back into the woods and they were gone. And I remember the one in the front of the pack was huge. I didn't never realized that wolves got that big. And let's see, another point, we were putting around in the little boat out on the water, and we saw this kind of dark blob that we could tell it was an animal from far away on the shoreline doing something. It was down on all fours, and we turned the boat towards it and started going towards it. And as we got closer and closer, we were like, that's a bear, that's like a small black bear or something. We got all excited and we were going to get closer and see the bear. And when we got up closer to it, it was a huge beaver. I had no idea beavers got this big either. I mean, it was kind of sitting on its hind haunches, chewing on something, a small branch. And I swear, if you'd have been standing up there next to it, it would have been the top of its head would have been up to your waist. It was huge. I had no idea beavers got that big. And that kind of goes for everything in this area. I had no idea things got this big. Trees, animals. Yeah, it was a crazy place. And we were very excited. And during this whole vacation, we saw moose, we saw bears, we saw beaver, we saw the wolves. Me and my cousin were the only ones that saw the wolves. So large animals and carnivores that Indiana boys were not used to. So at one point, we were kind of pushing the boundaries of the whole keep the houseboat in line of sight thing. And, we were young and stupid and testing all that. So we went around the corner out of the site, went around the corner of a shoreline kind of peninsula thing, and got out of sight of the houseboat for just a little bit. And we were thinking, well, we'll just go out. And when we turn left, well, the houseboat will be right there. It's anchored. So, but the reason we went back into this place is we saw this huge cliff, this rock face that just jutted up from the edge of the water. And it was, if I had to guess, it was a good 100 feet tall and leaned back towards the woods at about a 45-degree angle. So naturally, being 15-year-old kids, we beached the little boat and jumped out and started to try to climb this thing. And we had this little, I remember we had this little Kodak, remember the Kodak throwaway cameras that everybody bought back then? And, you'd take it to the Fox Moto place or whatever and get it developed, the 1 hour developed thing. We had one of those with us. And we were taking pictures of each other, but tilting the camera so it would look like we were climbing straight up the wall like Spider-Man. It was pretty funny. I think I still have those pictures someplace. But goofing around. So we were totally goofing around, being loud, But when we finally got to the top of this, we could look out over the lake, and it was a pretty cool scene. Of course, you could imagine the way this maze of land and water mixed together from being 100 feet above it. So we turned around and we look into the woods, and it was like eerie just to look into this woods because there was no other side to it. There was no light glimmering through from the other side. That was just really big trees, 6 to 5 feet wide at the base of the trunks. And it just got deeper and deeper, and in between the trees got blacker and blacker until it was just, you just could see nothing. You could look up and see the sky through the trees, but when you looked straight into it, it gave you just this, you could feel it in your stomach looking out here. And I remember saying something, he says something to me like he's getting this same feeling I'm getting, and he's like, man, you could just walk back in there and make one wrong turn and you'd be lost. You'd be dead. And I kind of, I was like hearing him say this creepy stuff, And I didn't know whether he was trying to creep me out or anything like that. So I look at him and I'm like, yeah, it's, but I don't remember exactly what I said, but we had a little conversation there. But when I looked back into the woods, I got this really bad feeling came over me, and it didn't hit me right at first. It didn't get into my brain right at first that something was different from the first time I was looking before he had said that. And I looked away from the woods. It was something was different. And I remembered what it was, trees can get a great big lump on the side of them, like a growth, like maybe there's a disease or something on the tree or a bug or something. It causes a great big lump on the side of a tree. I'm sure everybody has seen that in the woods. And I remembered that I had seen several of those, like 8 or 9 of them, way back into the woods. Like I distinctly remember these tall tree trunks that didn't have much branches on them. Branches didn't start on the trees till they got kind of up in the canopy, because they were big old growth trees, and not a lot of light got to the ground to grow smaller things. And I distinctly remembered several of these lumps on the sides of these trees as you looked back in there. Maybe they started maybe 50 yards back in there. You couldn't see a whole lot further than that. Some of them might have been closer. But when I looked back, all of these lumps and bumps that were on these trees were gone. The trees were completely smooth. When my brain finally registered that, I didn't show it to my cousin, but I got really scared. And I just looked at him. I said, man, you're creeping me out now. Let's just climb back down to the boat. So, I mean, because of what happened later, I now believe that may have been something maybe looking around the edges of the trees, because they were about that height, about the height of a person and taller, maybe something peeking around the edge of a tree that was the same color as the trees. And when we looked back, they were gone. So yeah, it creeped me out so bad that I was just like, nope, we're out of here. And we climbed back to the boat and luckily made our way back to the houseboat. And so, yeah, you can chime in with any questions anytime you like.
Yeah, I usually kind of just like to hang back until the end, because people tend to get into a nice little flow of things, and I don't like to interrupt that. So I just kind of take some notes, and then maybe at the end I'll barrage you with them.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks though.
Let's see what else here. Well, we had made our way back to the houseboat, and we had spent a few days fishing and doing things, and we were catching fish too. Man, this area, we were catching walleye and perch and bass and crappie, and we were catching a lot of fish. And so my dad and his brothers had found this place where they were catching a lot of fish back in there, and we were probably 2 days back into this area. Without the buoys to mark your way in the map, there's no way we could have found our way back out. But they had found this, and I believe I sent you a picture of it. I call it Bigfoot Island. And I don't know if I found this thing on Google Earth. I don't know if it's exactly the place, but it is in that area. It is right in that Thousand Lakes area, that picture. And I just zoomed way in on Google Maps and put some little boats, graphic representations of the way the boats and things were.
Yeah, I have that open as you're chatting, because it's just,
Yeah.
it is such a helpful diagram of things.
Yeah.
And I would be shocked if that's not the exact one, because I don't see how, I mean, that would be crazy if it's not, because it's exactly as fits into your encounter.
It's that shape.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, as I was looking at Google Earth and looking at this, I saw several things like this.
Really?
And islands attached to the land by, different things that maybe formed more of a peninsula-like, and things that formed kind of almost a tadpole shape.
Yeah.
With touching the main part of the land. And back in that area, even that main part of the land could have just been a bigger island, so Anyway, the out it's kind of hard to explain. The outsides of almost all the shorelines of this area, particular area, had large boulders all around them, for maybe from the shoreline up to where the tree line would start, maybe 40 to 50 feet of these huge boulders. And then the boulders would go like further back into the tree line. But right at the edge of the water, there was like a 3 to 4 foot space of smaller rocks, almost like gravel, that you could walk on and be on and stand on and fish, so you wouldn't be on large boats. And it was just weird, I guess, geologically, the way this area developed was just like that. I think that I've heard that a lot of this area, a lot of the reason it's shaped like this was because it was carved out by glaciers, way back in the day. But this island was attached to the mainland by this little, almost like an umbilical cord that was probably the width of a football field and maybe 10 yards wide to 15 yards wide. And it had these same rocks and stuff, but one side of it, the rocks, the gravel side of it, it must have just been the way the currents and the water flow was in that area. One side of it was a pretty nice beach. It was kind of a gravelly beach, but it was a beach nonetheless. And my uncles had pulled the houseboat and beached it, the front end of it, right up against this beach and anchored the back end of the boat. And this was where we were going to stay and fish this area. Because like I said, this area we'd been catching a lot of fish here. So we were going to stay here for a few days. And so we had this island, if I had to guess, it was probably, if you put, I know I use football fields a lot, but it's a it's a good analogy for this. If you were to put like maybe 5 or 6 football fields together, that's about how big this island was. And then this piece that connected it to the mainland. And you have to picture this, our boat, the main houseboat, was pushed right up against one side of this long piece that connected the umbilical cord part of it. And we played on the island. We knew that we'd been all over this island and playing on it and doing stuff. And we would steal my grandma's cigarettes and run to the other side of the island and smoke cigarettes because we were 15 and stupid and did those things. And so after, I believe it was, at night, the second night we were there, we started hearing wolves howling. So we all went up on the top deck. There was a deck on top of the boat. We were all standing up, and it was just, always loved animals. I'm a kind of an artist illustrator at my job, as well as a photographer. So I love drawing. My favorite thing to draw is animals and wildlife. And so I was loving it. It sounded like they were singing, these wolves in the distance. And it really did sound beautiful. And it was night. So you're hearing all the bugs and stuff too. And this went on for quite a while, hearing these wolves, and you could tell there was maybe 2 different packs of them, and one side would sing and the other side would sing, but they were off in the distance. But then we heard this one really long, louder howl that sounded like it was a little bit closer to the wolves. And it was louder than the regular howls of the wolves and longer. It was weirdly long, longer than a human could have the lung capacity to hold a note. It was probably twice that. And it kind of sounded like wolves, but it was just louder and deeper and different. But after that howl went off, it was dead silent. All the other wolves were quiet. And we did not hear another wolf that night. Just the noises of like the bugs and things. And my uncle kind of joked about it after it stopped, and he was just looked at everybody, and my uncle goes, "Wow, that was a big one," and everybody just kind of laughed it off. And I would later it would kind of come to me that I don't think that last howl was a wolf. I think it was something else. So that was I guess the first creepy thing would have been the lumps on the trees at the cliff. So the second creepy thing is like this weird howl that stopped all the other wolves from howling. And the creepy part of the story is me and my cousin thought we were going to be big and bad. We were going to go to the other side of the island from the houseboat, and we were going to night fish, and we were going to fish all night long. And because we were men, and so we packed stuff up in the little boat, and we didn't walk, that we could have walked there, but we took the little boat around so that we could have the boat kind of pushed up on the gravel right beside where we were fishing. And we sat out and started night fishing. We got there at sunset and later on. And so when we started, let's see, what we have with us? We had Coleman lantern. We had a couple of blankets to sit on so we could kind of sit on the rocks and be comfortable. And we were also sitting on those old orange, old school life jackets. We had a couple of them. We used them to kind of sit on. But we caught our first fish and realized that we had nothing to put the fish on or in, no stringer. We didn't want to go all the way back to the houseboat. So my cousin had this idea, and he starts digging this hole right next to where the water is kind of lapping up onto the gravel. And so I'm like, what are you doing? He says, let's make a little hole, like a little reservoir right here, and then we'll pile rocks around the front of it. And, we'll put the fish in that water, and then we'll get them later. So, and it worked pretty good. We dug this hole out of the gravel and lined the front edge of it against the larger part of the lake with bigger rocks so the fish couldn't jump out, and started catching fish. And we were really catching fish. We were catching crappie, these big, larger than your hand size, keeper size crappie. And we actually had to make the hole bigger as we were catching, because we were catching so many. And I guess by about 3 o'clock, if I had to guess, 2:33 in the morning, we had caught quite a few fish, and probably 15, 16 fish. We had this, how we were able to see catching these fish. We had this old Coleman lantern, the old kind that you had, the old green one. You had to pump it up, and it made the hissing noise, and you'd light it, and the things would light up inside it. And we had a piece of foil around one part of the glass, so it would only shine out into the water, not back into our eyes. That was something my grandpa had taught us about night fishing, is the foil on the Coleman lantern. And it worked pretty good. The light all shined out onto the water and not back on us. So we're sitting there fishing, and we are drinking. We had stole 2 Pabst Blue Ribbon beers out of the fridge and took with us. And so we had those.
Amen to that. Got the PBRs out.
Yeah, the old PBR. That was my uncle's favorite. So we had a little refrigerator full of that back at the houseboat. And we'd have got in trouble if they didn't know, but we swiped them and swiped some of more of my grandma's cigarettes, and we were out there being men, right? We weren't being men for much longer, because as we're catching these fish and having a good time, we hear a splash from kind of the opposite direction of the houseboat and further out to the point of the island. And it's out of our sight. We can't see it because it's dark. It makes that noise like when you throw a large something like a brick in the water. It didn't make that little slapping splash sound. It was like that depth noise, that kind of that kabloosh kind of sound. And we kind of looked at each other, and we were like, man, that was a big fish. But in the back of my mind, I was like, that didn't sound like a fish. And we didn't really think a whole lot about it. And that's when it wasn't but maybe 15 seconds after that splash that we heard something in the tree line behind us. Now, the tree line behind us is past these boulders, which is probably 40-ish feet. to the tree line. And it's back in the tree line to where we can't see. It didn't, you could hear the branches and stuff cracking as it stepped. And I don't remember being able to really tell that if it was four-legged or bipedal. I mean, I don't know. I've done a lot of hunting. The way things sound, a deer can be walking through the woods and sound like it's bipedal. A squirrel, when a squirrel goes through leaf litter, it jumps from spot to spot. It sounds exactly just like somebody walking. So you couldn't really tell, but it did sound, it almost gave you the impression that it was moving really slow and trying to sneak, like a creeping step, not just chomp, 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 chomp through the woods. My cousin and I are immediately like, they're trying to scare us. Our dads are back there, they're trying to scare us. And so my cousin yells back into the woods, "We know you're back there. You're not scaring us." And, there's nothing. And when he did that, the sound of the footsteps stopped. And then it wasn't just a few seconds later, they started back up slowly, even slower than the first time. And they went on down past us towards where the houseboat was, down the other side of the kind of the shoreline of this island from us. So this whole time we're still sitting with our fishing poles in our hands. Well, it's not too much after that, maybe a minute. From the opposite side of the first splash, we hear another splash. Same kind of depthy noise. Still can't see it. It's off in the darkness past where we can see. This time we look at each other and we start talking about it, and we're like, this is odd now. And we're starting to get creeped out now. Because when we knew that beavers could make a pretty wild noise because we had, as we were riding around during the daylight in our little boat, we had seen beaver out in the water swimming. And when they get mad at you, you get too close to them and they get mad at you and they do this dive, they slap their tail on the water. And it can make this little kind of kabloosh sound when they do that, but there's a tail slap with it, kind of a smack on the water. And it didn't sound like that. When a fish jumps, it makes kind of almost a spattering, fluttering noise of a splash. And it just didn't, it sounded like something being dropped into the water heavy. So we're sitting there and we're starting to get kind of nervous, and we're pretending we're not nervous as we're talking about it. And so I pick up the lantern and I shine it down that direction. There's nothing that I can see. And so I put the lantern back down, and then almost immediately after I put the lantern back down, we hear these footsteps again behind us in the woods. We're kind of listening to them, and we're kind of looking over our shoulders back into the woods. And neither one of us is brave enough to actually pick the lantern up and shine it into the woods behind us. We didn't say that to each other, but it was kind of an unspoken thing. Nobody was brave enough to pick the lantern up, shine it into the woods. And so when we turn back around, the footsteps kind of stop. We turn back around, and now we're looking out into the water the way that the light from the lantern is shining out into the water. And this Coleman lantern is probably shining out into the water, I'd say another 40 feet, another 40, maybe 50 feet. So we're sitting there and we're fishing for a moment, and we hear something above us up in the tree line behind us, but high. A branch cracks and makes a little rustling noise. And then as we're looking out into the water, And I swear this is crazy. A rock the size of a football and kind of oblong shaped goes tumbling over our heads, probably, I don't know, well higher than a basketball goalpost. I'd have to say 16, 17, maybe 20 feet above our heads. Tumbling straight over our heads, goes out into the water, and we can see it in the shine of the lantern hit the water, make this huge splash that just sends this column of water up into the air and makes that same damn noise as those last two splashes, that kabloosh sound. We immediately stand up, and we've still got our fishing poles in our hands, and we turn towards the woods. We're staring at and still not picking up the lantern, staring into the woods. And my cousin goes, in a really cracking, shaky voice, he goes, because we had seen bears, he said, Jeff, because he knew I knew a lot about animals and stuff, and because I like to draw them and things, he goes, Jeff, bears can't throw rocks, can they? And I just said, no. And as soon as just a few seconds after I said that, we hear from the direction we're standing, we're facing the woods, we hear this deep, big exhale. All we can see by is kind of some moonlight as our eyes are trying to adjust to this. And because the moon is out and it's pretty bright, there's stars and moon. And so we can kind of see where the trees are, but we can't see back in there. We hear this exhale. It sounded like a bull or something that size, that lung capacity. Just it didn't make a voice noise. It was more of just a huff, just a long, almost like a sigh, but very deep. Man, as soon as we heard that, we were gone. The fishing poles dropped from our hands. We took off down those rocks. I mean, skinny 15-year-old boys running as fast as they can when they think something's chasing them. Our feet are just lighting across the tops of these boulders, almost like the wolves we saw earlier. And when I think back on it, I'm like, if one of us would have fell in the dark on that size of boulders, we'd have gotten hurt really bad. But we didn't. We made it. We ran all the way the 200 or so yards back around the edge of the island, across the little peninsula, got to the front of the houseboat. This gangplank thing that is basically just a board with grip tape on it that was leaned down onto the beach to get off the boat and walk around on the beach and stuff, was pulled up. Didn't stop us in the least. Our feet went into the water. We dove up onto the deck of the boat, practically ran across the little front part of the deck, practically busted in the screen door of the place going in there. And we're basically freaking out at this point. And we're waking people up. We're not telling people to wake up, but the noise and the ruckus and the vibration of the boat and everything, people start waking up, and they're not happy. But then they see that we're kind of in a panic. So they're like, what's going on? What happened? So after a few minutes, and we're able to get out coherent sentences, we tell them what happened. And I remember their faces. My uncles and my dad, they just looked at each other with this little grimace grin on their face, and they were like, what? And we were like, no, really. And they were like, it was just, you guys are just imagining things. You got scared. There's just a deer or a moose back there in the woods, and it's just fish jumping. So as my uncles are saying this, and we're pleading, almost pleading with them, My grandpa doesn't say a word, quiet, gets up, goes to where the steering wheel and the key ignition is on the boat. I remember it vividly. He didn't say a word, puts his hand on the steering wheel, starts the boat up, throws it in reverse, and backs the whole thing off of this beach. Keeps it in reverse until we're like 200 yards or so off out into the water. And then he shuts the boat off. He walks out and puts the anchors back down and doesn't say a word about it. So now we're off the beach and we're out in the thing. And this kind of calms me and my cousin down a little bit. And later that night, my bunk in my bed, me and my cousins were kind of up high. And mine was in the front. So I was in the very front of the cabin part of the boat, up on this bunk next to the roof. And there's this little kind of RV trailer window kind of thing on the front that's very thin and like a long rectangle. And I'm staring out this thing at night. It's now got to be 3:30 in the morning, and I'm staring out and I can see the peninsula part that connects the island to the main part of the land. And it's really misty. There's like fog and there's like low fog, but the moon is out. I can see the moon back over the trees and I can see stars. And I'm sitting here trying to fall asleep, but still kind of shaking. I see a shape cross across this land bridge I tried to make kind of an artist representation picture of it that you have, but it was nowhere near that clear. It was a lot further away through the mist. And I do remember it was on this peninsula. There were cattails and the rocks and sapling trees that had grown up. And I can remember when we were playing out there, the cattails were probably up to my chin. And the tops of these sapling trees, you had to look up at them. So they were a little bit, taller than a man, most of them. Some of them were bigger, some of them were smaller. For the most part, they were a little taller than a man. The shape, and it was silhouetted by the moon, came out of the woods, being very slow and it was on the opposite side from us, like it was trying to use the cover of the peninsula itself and be on the opposite side of it from us. Came out from the woods that was the island and crossed across there. And I remember the cattails that were up to my chin were at this, whatever this was, it was at about its waist. And it was like a whole head taller than the sapling trees. I remember it, even a part of it, even kind of coming out and pushing some of the sapling trees out of its way as it was moving. And no detail, all silhouette, but this thing was upright. It was, like I said, it was probably 200 yards out, but it was upright. It did not look long and square like a moose walking across there, or a big bear or something walking across there. It seemed to be upright to me. And my stomach shrank. I think I stopped breathing. I could feel my heart beating in my ears as this thing went across the thing. And I never said anything to anybody about that. But, and I did actually sleep later that morning. I remember the glow of the morning starting to come up right as I fell asleep. Well, it was either later that day or the next day. My grandpa kind of pulled me aside. He said the reason he backed the houseboat off and did not make fun of us the night before was because he was one time fishing with the boat that we had with us, actually, in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, at a lake called Perch Lake. And you can look that up. It's an actual lake, Upper Peninsula, Michigan. He said that him and some buddies, and there was another boat too, were on Perch Lake, and they were fishing about 50 yards or 60 yards or so offshore in front of these old cabins that looked like they could have been nice and lived in, and almost newer built cabins, but yet the brush was grown up around them and the windows were broken out of them, and one of them, the door was leaning halfway off of it, and they all kind of had a conversation about, wow, those look like they could be nice cabins, but yet they're just deserted. So as they're fishing offshore of that, all of these rocks, he says, from the size of golf balls to maybe hardball baseballs, come flying out of this brush that's around these cabins up into the air, and coming, from, flying so far that they had to make it down to the beach and then 50 yards out into the water. And he said, you can just see them. It was daylight. He said, you could just see them coming through the air. They'd come up out of the brush and come out, and they were splashing all around their boats. They said it was like 10 and 12 rocks, and they just kept coming. And he said they actually looked at each other and they got scared, and it's like, these rocks are big enough. If they hit one of us, it's if a rock that size hits you in the head, it could probably kill you maybe. So they started up their engines real quick and literally had to make a dash for it to get away from these rocks. And when my grandpa was telling me this, he made sure that we were away from everybody else, and he was whispering. So that's why my grandfather backed the boat off just quietly and didn't say a word. So yeah, that's kind of what happened. And to this day, if somebody ever asks me if I believe in Bigfoot, I tell them that there probably is a Bigfoot. And I tell them this story. I don't get excited or anything anymore when I tell this story. Well, I kind of did. My heart started pounding a little bit right at that one part, but I've told this story so many times. It's through the years. I've told it a lot. So yeah. And like I said, it probably could be explained away. Like maybe it was a moose or something that walked across the peninsula, or maybe, I don't know how, and I don't know what kind of human could throw a rock the size of a football, if you do the math, for it to crack through the canopy of the trees from the woods, go over 40 feet of boulders, and then 40 more feet out into the water. That's 80 feet plus. A rock the size of a football. And if you've ever picked up a rock that size, there's no way. There's no way a man could throw a rock like that. You'd need a catapult of some kind. So I don't know how you'd explain that away. I've been trying to explain things away, forever, because I'm 61 years old, and I've had 3 unexplainable things happen to me in my life, and this is one of them.
But before you go there, let me get through a couple of my questions here about this encounter, because this is an awesome one. Okay, so first of all, what your grandfather shared, it reminds me a little bit of the supposed Portlock, Alaska, siege, where the Bigfoot supposedly drove a whole town out of that area of Alaska. I'm not saying that's what happened, and we don't know exactly what happened with that Perch Lake, Michigan area that your grandfather saw, but it is of interest. And if things are trying to pelt you with huge rocks or banging on cabins or being sighted, I mean, anytime you see something that big, I'm sure it's quite humbling. So, yeah. Okay. The rock that went tumbling over you guys' head, that was the size of a football, and I'm sure that you've heard other Bigfoot encounters, they can be pretty accurate when they want to be. Do you feel like it intentionally just barely missed you guys, that it could have in fact hit one of you if it wanted to?
Oh yeah, probably. From what I've heard about just listening to other Bigfoot stuff, yeah, I'm sure it could have. The oh, there was one part that I didn't mention was the day after that happened, my dad made us go back and get all the stuff that we left, and nothing had been touched. Even where we dropped our fishing poles on the rocks had been touched, except for one thing. All of the fish were gone out of that little reservoir we dug. There wasn't scales or guts or anything like something sat there and ate them and made a mess. They were just gone.
Yeah, I wonder if that's why they left all of your gear alone. They're like, well, thanks for the fish. Maybe we'll leave your fishing poles alone.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe it was, and the noise that it made that actually made us take off running. I think back on it, and I'm thinking maybe that was like an actual sigh, like, come on, you little skinny things, get out of here,
Yeah.
you know? And, maybe it just, I don't know, maybe it just wanted our fish. I don't know.
Did you ever tell your cousin that you actually ended up seeing it?
Later I did, but he will, and this was after we were adults, way later on. He's moved to another state. He's in Texas now, and he will acknowledge that it happened and be like, yeah, that was pretty crazy, but he won't talk about it. He won't tell it, or he won't talk about it. But he will acknowledge it. But he's probably, other than later on in life telling people this story, at that time I did not tell anybody that I actually saw the thing walk across, whatever it was. If it was the thing, I still try to counter doubt myself constantly,
Right. I get that.
and I try to explain it away in my head, because I'm not any kind of researcher. I'm not any kind of hunter, cryptid hunter or researcher, or a, a, a paranormal person, I guess you'd say, a clairvoyant person. I don't, you know, I've heard you on some of your other podcasts refer to people as normies. I'm probably 70% normie. I will I will try to explain things away. So, but I just can't, I've never been able to explain that rock. I can explain away the shape I saw that walked across the thing. Because what if it was a moose? I was far enough away, but it didn't, it looked upright to me, but there was no detail in it because we were pretty far away.
How about that first excursion with you and your cousin, and you saw the 8 or 9 tree peakers? What about your cousin? Did he witness that they were there and then they weren't there?
I never said anything to him about it. I mean, when I said, you are creeping me out, let's just climb back down to the boat, my my brain was not really registering, did I really see something that changed
Right.
with the trees? And in that moment. But now I believe that it could very well have been. And there was a lot of it was 7, 8, 9 of those lumps on those trees back in that woods. And when I looked back, all the trees were straight up and down. There were no lumps. And they were all, I'd say, anywhere from the head height of a man to 9 feet up on the trees. because some of them, because if I'm at eye level at the top of this cliff looking back in there, some of them were up above my head,
Mm,
and some of them were kind of even with me.
right.
So if they were, I mean, maybe maybe that is just like maybe that was a family group of some kind and that was just their area. Lo and behold, something is happening that has, how many times has kids ever ran up to in that wilderness in that area, ran up and tried to climb up that rock face? Maybe that's something that was just so brand new to them. They were like, what is going on? These things are climbing up here, because
Yes.
how often would that have happened?
Yeah,
That
seeing
kids
as there's
climb that
so
rock?
many options in that area. I mean, the man
Yeah.
that rented you the houseboat specifically said, look, it is so easy to get lost out here. These kids need to keep sight of the houseboat at all times.
Yes.
So, I mean, you're probably spot on that these particular Bigfoot, this family or clan, whatever you want to call them, we're not used to this kind of a thing.
Yeah. And they had a little, maybe that was their little summit. Maybe they liked looking off of that, the way the sight from looking off of the top of that cliff was unbelievable in that area. And maybe that was just kind of their spot. And we totally, crashed the party, invited ourselves, and they were just probably peeking around these trees, being like, what are they going to do now?
Yeah, look at these little hairless things. Look at these little noisy
Yeah.
little hairless things. And and this is all conjecture, but because I've heard and you've heard other encounters where the assumption was that the person had usually inadvertently gone into essentially their living room through the front door, and
Yeah.
maybe you guys were just in, like, you and your whole family were just in the driveway, but you guys were starting to kind of get a little too close for too long,
Yeah.
and they were getting a little bit ticked off. Had you guys seen any other people at all in those couple of days driving by on boats, or heard anybody else off in the distance?
It was a few. We had passed at a distance two other houseboats, but as far back as we went, we did not see any boats around us when we were that far back in, because we were 2 days back into that area.
Yeah, wow. I,
So
I'll bet you, though, there are probably so many people that have just strange stories of sounds or rocks being thrown or full on sightings that just they have never shared. They're more on your cousin's side of things, where they're like, yeah, that was weird, but that's all we need to say about that.
yeah, I mean, and when you say somebody's a normie, I bet you that 99% of those normies, they've had some kind of little unexplained thing happen to them
Absolutely.
in their life.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, this area, I've not really heard of any other, Bigfoot sightings or stories. There probably are some from that Thousand Lakes area, but I've never really heard any.
Well, my hope is, of course, which is always my hope, but maybe once this airs, folks will reach out. Whether they want to be on the show or not, that's fine. Don't care. Always say that. I would rather you come on the show. I love doing this. But I mean, yeah, if you had an encounter or a sighting or something strange and you'd like to, I could just forward the information on to Jeff. I know that he would appreciate that. You don't have to come on the show, but it's all about comparing the stories, comparing the encounters and the data points. It's just so interesting. Gosh, I love Bigfoot. When you reached out, I was so happy that you wanted to share this, Jeff, and I do appreciate that. So, okay, so you have other happenings. Let's hear about it.
Only two things have ever happened to me. One of them I was 17 and in northern Indiana. And the area, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you the area because there's a whole nother podcast on this area. It's this area of where the Wabash River connects to the Mississinawa River, and the town that's right there. There's another guy that's got a whole podcast on this area. I don't remember his name, but this area, everything is named after Native Americans. The Mississinawa River, and that's totally. There's lots of things named after it. So there's all kinds of burial mounds. There's all kinds of ancient, like early settler werewolf and dogman and hairy man things from this area, and almost mystical stuff. But that's all pretty much just kind of lore. But there's a road called River Road, and I was on a date with I was 17, still in high school, in my 1971 El Camino.
Hell yeah. I like that.
With an 8-track tape player going, and we're on a date, and we're going down River Road. It's back in the woods and back by the Mississinawa Dam. And we're going back there because that's where kids, there's not a lot to do in northern Indiana. That's where the kids would go to park, is out by the dam. And so we're heading that way, and I'm on River Road. It's night, and my car starts sliding, and this is like late summer, very late summer, and it's night. And it's kind of wet and muggy outside, but there's stars, but it's kind of, the road is wet, it's kind of muggy, and my car starts sliding around, right? And it almost gets to where it's like I'm on ice, but it's in the summertime. So I bring the El Camino to a stop, and in the headlights out on the road, me and Lori are looking out there, and we're seeing all these little things on the road, hundreds, maybe thousands of them hopping across the road, right? And I get out of the car, and I get my Bic lighter, and I'm like flashing my Bic lighter, and I'm looking, and it's thousands of these tiny little frogs, like 1 inch to 2 inches long, and they're all crossing the road heading towards, it's like a froggy migration of some kind of northern Indiana. And so I look at my rear. I had these big wide tires like guys used to put on their cars back then on the back, and they are just covered in these poor little frogs, right? That's why the car was sliding all over the place. And that's just the first weird thing that happened on this river road this night. So we get back in the car, and I start going down the road really slow, so I could keep traction and go. Now I remember right before this one curve on Lori's side of the car. So she's right next to the edge of the road on her passenger side of the car. And there's maybe a little ditch, and then a barbed wire fence. And then it's just kind of goes into almost dark night, and you can't really see what's back there. So this barbed wire fence is probably 15 feet from the car on this country road, on River Road. And we see this, what looks like a girl. I can't tell you that she had like old clothes on or something like this, but she had like, just like, because it was pretty dark. She just had like lighter clothes on, and they were kind of flowy. It looked like a dress. And she was about 15 feet on the opposite side of the fence. And she had long dark hair, and she was just standing there staring towards the road. We pull up, and we're going really slow, and we see this, and Lori's like, "Who is that?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, this is like, and there was some houses on this road, but they're very far in between, and we're in between these houses. It's like maybe one house every mile or so. And I was like, "Roll down your window." So she rolls down her window, and back then you had to crank your window down. She rolls down the window, and I look, and it's just this girl that looks like she could be a teenager, maybe, kind of thin, but off in the dark. I can't make out a whole lot, but I can see that her eyes are kind of like, dark. Her skin is kind of pale. Her hair is dark. Her clothes are kind of light. And Lori's staring at her, and I'm kind of leaned over so I can see around Lori's 70s hair that she had going on. And as soon as I said, "Are you okay?" This girl's mouth opened, and it was kind of I remember it kind of being that same, even though it was looking through the night and could just barely see it. I could see that the darkness of her eyes was like the same as the darkness of her mouth when her kind of jaw kind of slacked open. And Lori immediately starts rolling up the window, and she screams, and she goes, "Go, go, 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 go." And she rolls the window, cranks the window up really fast. We try to go, and the tires are just spinning from the frogs. And it takes us like, it takes a way longer than it should have for people being scared to get out of there. But we took off down the road. So that's like the one ghosty thing that's kind of happened to me. That's the only thing that's ever happened to me like that. And I'm going to debunk it. It could have been a prank. Easily could have been somebody, because, this area, Northern Indiana, lots of teenagers, lots of people that are out being bored doing stuff because there's nothing to do. And it was late summer. But one thing, when me and a couple other of my friends went back out there a couple of days later, and we were in one of my friends' Dodge Charger, and we went out there, and it was daylight. And I was like, "Yeah, man, this is right where it happened." Because me and Lori was telling everybody our ghost thing that happened to us, right? So the whole high school's like, they saw a ghost out by so now all of a sudden everybody's just beaming in the high school, and so we were out there, and I said, "Yeah, man, I remember the curve, the sign right there, the yellow sign for the curve. We were right here, and there's the fence, and she was like level with the car right on the other side of that fence." Well, we got out of the Charger, and we walked up kind of and stepped up onto where the opposite side of the ditch next to the fence was. And when we looked out there was like a 15 to 20 foot, maybe 30-foot wide gorge with a stream in the bottom of it, right where that girl would have been. Right exactly where that girl would have been. Because I remember that, because it was right there. There was the sign for the curve right there. This is where I was parked. And I was like, "She was right here." And my friend goes, "You mean she was floating?" And I said, "I don't know, man." I said, "She looked like she was right here. She might have been on the other side of it. She didn't." And I looked at the other side of it, and I'm like, "No, that's too far." And I'm like, I wasn't going to admit she was floating. I was like, "I don't know, man." And so we all get back to the car. And when we did get around the curve and we kept going, and we were like, all just kind of like, "Wow, man, you saw a ghost." Cause we were doing things that we shouldn't have. And we get around to this curve right on the opposite side of this curve, on the opposite side of a tree line. When you look back up in there across this big ditch, there was one of those really old graveyards, partially grown over, partially back in the woods, partially out of the woods. It's like one of those old home family graveyards that people used to have on their properties back in there. So that didn't help matters much. So we just kind of rolled out of there. But that actually became kind of a big ghost story around our high school people at that time, that just more proof that the Cinewall Dam is haunted, and all this River Road is haunted, and all this stuff. So, but that's the only other thing. And
Jeff,
so many questions about that?
did you ever tell Lori the fact that this ditch existed right where she would have been standing?
No, I did not,
That probably would have
because
freaked her right the hell out,
it
right?
really freaked her out because she was on the side of the car that this was happening,
Yeah.
and she had the window rolled down. And as we were trying to get away, the car was slipping and sliding and trying to get away very slowly. I mean, like we were on ice. But the thing never moved because our eyes were like glued on it,
Except for her freaky mouth.
except for her mouth opened.
You know, it's like the frogs were there to keep you from going anywhere quickly.
I know. And I've never looked up anything like biological about, frog migration or anything, or the
Right.
species of frog in that area. But it was like a frog migration because everything was kind of wet or something, and they were heading towards the river. They were all hopping the same direction. It was really weird. It was really weird.
Was the river in her direction or opposite or going like where you were going?
Well, River Road travels along parallel to River Road.
Okay.
So my driver's side, you have the oncoming traffic lane, and then the river's on that side.
Okay.
So the side of where there would be like farmland and woods would have been on Lori's side, and that's where the fence and the ditch and everything was.
That's just so strange to have those two things occupying that space at the same time, because either one of those things would have been a unique experience.
Yeah. It's just weird that there were all these frogs there at this time. But like I said, somebody it could have been like something somebody had hung from a wire or something just to scare people as they were driving down the road or something.
Except, and I do understand where you're coming from with trying to explain things, and everyone should do that. But how could you, if that was the case, someone was out there pranking, even if, so let's just say it's a real person out there pranking, they put their sister up to it and she's standing there and acting all creepy. Would you say though that the way that the mouth looked, that was in fact something highly unusual, the way that the mouth looked? Because Lori immediately started to scream, "Go!" Like it was just so very odd, something so very strange about this mouth.
It was night, and I was pulled up completely parallel to it. So my headlights weren't really, it was just kind of residual light reflecting back from the headlights, because the headlights were nowhere near like on, or we were past because the car was parallel to it. So just a little bit of residual light from the car was all that was hitting it. It was just almost like there was like hints of dark eyes, and then where there was no mouth, or where a mouth would have been, appeared like a mouth opened, and darkness there where you would see the mouth open.
If there was a person that had painted black paint on that area, would it look like that? Like how would a person be able to execute that, I guess is what I'm asking.
I don't know, because it did look like a mouth that opened, and a jaw that like lowered for a mouth to open.
Yikes.
And yeah, just long dark hair, kind of a dress, almost a nightgowny looking dress, I guess. Long sleeves.
See, and this is another, I'll say it again. I mean, this is River Road in northern Indiana. If anyone has ever seen this young lady, if this is some kind of a reoccurring situation, please get in touch, because goodness gracious, that is creepy as hell.
Yeah. Well, there's three river roads.
Oh, is there?
Right there in that area. So this would be the river road that is beside the Mississinawa River.
Mississinawa. Okay.
Yes.
I love those kinds of names. The Native American.
Everything
names.
is Native American.
Yeah.
It's Miami County.
I mean, that might be the answer right there. Anytime you have, could just be the land. acting up and storing on to strange things. I mean, honestly, what are the chances of all these thousands of frogs, and then you have this? It's just, I don't know. It's just strange, all the way around. Absolutely cool story, and I do like the fact that eventually became this kind of famous story in this area because of what you and Lori saw that night. And it does make me wonder if any of the other, kids eventually did end up seeing her, but then just like the Bigfoot stories and encounters, that they just didn't want to share it.
Oh, now let me tell you, after the high school and everything was kind of buzzing with this, how teenagers are. Everybody was making up stories about stuff that happened to them.
Oh yeah.
It went crazy. And, oh yeah, Mississinawa Road, River Road and Mississinawa, it's all haunted out there. Well, I saw this and I saw,
The Mississinawa Phantom strikes again, except this time she jumps the barbed wire and onto the hood, right? Like it's a bigger and bigger fish every time.
She rode on my hood like Rockford Files.
Oh gosh. Oh, that's a creepy one though. My goodness. Poor Lori. Did she talk about that much after that, or she's kind of like your cousin? She was like, that was not cool.
Yeah, a little bit. Just that how bad it freaked her out, and I'm never going out, never going out there again,
Yeah, pick another date spot, Jeff,
Yeah.
No more of that. Oh yeah, well what's your other encounter or story? That's your sister's, you said.
Well, I have one that my sister tells it so much better, and I have it as a recording actually. But she was in 2002, my sister, and I actually told her she should write it all down as a story and send it to you. But my sister in 2002, she was the head nurse in the same area, Indiana, at a nursing home. Her and her DON, director of nursing, were both in on this story. They were opening a new nursing home, so it was all filling up with people. And this one lady named Margaret tells the story to my sister and her DON. This lady was completely coherent. She would go through these spells where she would get really bad shakes, and she was really old. And other than that, she was fine. Her mind was sharp. She was good. So this lady Margaret tells my sister and the DON, she goes, now, just let me warn you that they may find me. She said they haven't found me yet. It's been a long time, but they probably will find me. They always find me. And the nurses, they're like, Margaret, who is going to find you? And she goes on to say, well, it's people, but they're not from here. And the nurses are like, go on. And the lady goes on to say, they're not from where we're from. She says, they're from outer space. And this is just this lady talking, right, to my sister. She's in a nursing home, and then the nurses are all looking at each other. My sister's looking at her DON, and they're like, okay, now we know why she's in a nursing home. And and this lady's in her 80s, right? So this goes on, and it's after about a year. This was 2002. About a year later, my sister, they're still working there. My sister's head nurse, and then there's the DON. Her DON is there, and the owner. Margaret gets a roommate, and her name is Umbra. The Umbra moves in with Margaret into her room, and they become pretty good friends. And it's about a month later, Margaret says to my sister and some of the nurses, they found me. And the nurses go, who found you? And she said, the people I was telling you about found me. And they go, you mean the aliens found you? And she's like, yes. She said, they put a new chip in my ear. And she said, that's why they came and found me, because the old chip went bad and they put a new chip in my ear. You gotta think, this is like an 80-year-old lady saying this. This is, not I can't see somebody coming up with that kind of story that's like 80 years old, and so she goes, look at my pillow, and she gives my sister her pillow. Look at what's on my pillow, and it's discharged from her ear, right? It's blood and like some gooey discharged from her ear. She goes, they put a new chip in my ear. And she goes, I want an MRI. And the nurses are like, we can't give you an MRI unless there is like a valid, in 2002, now you can get an MRI if you got a cold. But back then, MRI, in 2002, MRI was a big deal. They were like, you can't get an MRI unless there's really something wrong with you, Margaret. After this incident, a couple of nights later, the night alarm goes off. The night nurses are going to Margaret and Ambra's room. It's the middle of the night. It's the night nurses. It's not my sister, not the DON. So my sister gets this call from the night nurses. They said Ambra is out in the hall and she's on the floor and she's hysterical and she's crying. And she goes, you need to come here. And she says, on the phone, she was like, Ambra says that there's somebody in the nursing home, but none of the alarms on any of the doors have gone off, because they had night alarms on the doors. It's a nursing home. And so my sister and the DON drive down there in the middle of the night. Ambra is just out of her mind, scared. And she says they were in the room. They came out of the room. They went down the hall that way, and they were like, nobody. The alarms didn't go off. And Ambra proceeds to tell them, I am never going back in that room again. And I'm going to tell you this, and I'm only going to tell you this one time, and I'm never going to speak about it again. If you try to have somebody come and talk to me about this, I will just tell them it never happened. And I'm never going to go back in that room. You put me someplace else, or I'm just going to leave. I'm going to call my family and I'm going to get out of here. She tells the story that these people came into the room. They were extremely tall. I can't remember the name of the nurse that she compared them to, but there was this one nurse that was really tall. And she said they were way taller than so-and-so. So they were like really tall people. And they said they came in the room. They went right by my bed. They went to Margaret's bed, and I could hear them talking. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I could hear them talking. It didn't sound like English. And it was kind of muffled. And I said, what are you people doing here in the middle of the night? You're not supposed to be in here. She said the curtain, there was the draw curtains between the beds in their room to split them. The curtain came back a little bit, and one of them peeked around and looked at Ambra and said, shh, we won't be very long. And put back. This freaked Ambra out, because she said, my sister said she called them babuskas. She said they were wearing babuskas. And what she was talking about is, I think my sister said she was talking about like a burqa-like thing. These very tall people had these thin, long coverings that were like robes where only their face showed. And she said there were 3 of them. And she said, when they left the room, She said they did not walk out of the room. She said, you know how I don't like light coming in from the door. I have to make sure it's shut. You can't leave my door cracked and the light comes in because I can't stand it. I can't sleep. She said, well, the door was cracked open from them coming in. And she said, they went right past the front of my bed and I leaned out and looked. They were not touching the floor. The light from the door was shining right under them and they were not stepping. They were completely smooth and they floated out of the room. They went right by my bed and one of them looked at me as they went by my bed. And that's when I ran out of the room and I saw them go down the hall. And like I said, this lady, and Margaret, the next day after this, Margaret was telling all the nurses, see, I told you, I have a witness now. I told you they would come. I told you they'd find me. I told you what was happening. Nobody ever believes me. And my sister tells this story a lot better, but yeah, that's what happened. And Umbra never went back in that room. I don't even know. I don't know if she even stayed there anymore. But yeah, this woman was told the story of what happened to this other woman.
Jeez.
Is that crazy?
Goodness gracious, that is so creepy. Poor Umbra, huh? She's just like, listen, I'm an innocent bystander here. And, you know, it's funny. They can float and they're not touching the floor, but then they chose to not, I don't know, float through the ceiling or go out the window. They actually went out the door and down the hall. And then where did they go, you know?
Yeah. Well, my sister said that they were like, it was like they were on the floor, but they weren't stepping. They were just, they just glided like a few inches off the floor as they went. And they were in these, right in a row in these long robes. My sister, she said that she never explained like what their faces looked like or anything like that. It's just that it was them and they found me and they're from outer space. So, but you know, and they would tell Margaret, there's no way that even if you both say how true that this is and that this happened, there's absolutely no proof that any of this could happen. Because in 2002, there weren't any, and it was a fairly new nursing home that they had just opened like the year before. So there weren't any cameras. There were cameras outside, but none inside. So,
boy, I bet Margaret, I bet she would have, you know, if she was around to tell her entire history, would have a lot of stories about what's going on in her life, because obviously she's one of these quote unquote chosen ones where they keep coming to visit. And
yeah.
And
I mean, I don't know about like leaving, like an abduction type leaving, but
yeah,
they were visiting her, and they were, I mean, from what she says, they were doing things, you know, with her whole implant thing in her ear and everything. So
yeah, keeping an eye on her. My goodness.
And you know, you can explain it away as just being really old people in a nursing home. I mean, you know, so but yeah, Umbra saying that she's just going to say this once, and if you try to send people to me, I will tell them it, you know, her being all that and being that hysterical and never stepping foot back in there.
Yeah.
Or speaking to her friend again, you know, that says something.
Oh, she never wanted to even speak to Margaret again?
I don't think so.
Oh.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I guess after that, she's like, look what you brought into my gray matter. I don't need to experience that again. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. See, that's on the no list. No thanks.
Yeah. 3
very, very tall, quote unquote, people. No, I don't think so. Wow. That's, yeah. Nope. No, thank you. I'll take the Bigfoot, actually. I don't know about you, Jeff, but That stuff is on a whole nother level. That said,
Yeah.
I mean, you're still, I don't know if you want people to know the state you live in now, but you are in an area that has plenty of Bigfoot sightings. Do you want to see a Bigfoot again?
From a distance,
Yeah.
I'd be okay. Because I don't know, I guess I'm prepped for it.
Yeah, I'd say so.
It'd be like, seeing it from a distance and I would be like, I knew it, you know. So
Still, that encounter up in Minnesota is pretty cool. I mean, not cool at the time. That was probably pretty damn frightening. And when you're describing how you're running as fast as you can on that very rocky, gravelly beach back to the houseboat, and pointing out like, hey, we could have, if we would have fallen, it would have really injured one of us.
In moonlight.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's not like you grab the lantern and you're just meandering on back to the houseboat. You guys are full force just booking it.
We had the little boat right beside us, beached. And we were like, we didn't even think about it. Was just run. Didn't even think about getting in the little boat and, starting it up and moving. No, we heard that hoof and we were gone.
Yeah, ain't nobody got time to pull up the anchor for the little boat and hop in and start the motor and all this. No, that's where it's fight or flight, and it was flight time.
Yeah.
Especially something that large with that can throw rocks that big, and it, at just even at that age, you guys are going, this is not normal. This is not good. Look at the rock that just. Yeah. As you say, kaploosh, you can hear that, is in your head when somebody says that word. That's not good. And I have full faith, and I hazard to say, and I don't know for sure, nobody does, but I would hazard to say that it probably could have pegged one of you guys, and you easily could have been just gonzo if that would have hit you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. A rock the size of a football. Oh, yeah.
So I guess I guess it's a good thing they just. It does make me wonder if maybe they weren't ticked that you were there, but they did watch you catching all of these fish, and that's simply all that they were after.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really thought about it. Actually, may have been sitting in the woods watching us.
Yeah, like maybe that's another reason they didn't care to hit you, because you kill or hurt one of these hairless things, a lot more come. So they were just like, hey, get out of here. We see you've caught some goodness. Like, let us at the goodness, because they figured you weren't going to stop to gather all these fish. You're going to scare the crap out of these kids. They're going to be gone.
Yeah. Or in that area, just one of them just making you disappear.
Yeah.
Jumped in, because it very well, not let alone hitting somebody with a rock, it could have jumped out of the woods on us.
Absolutely.
Really. Carried us off somewhere or something.
I do think, and for the most part, I would say that this is along the lines of being something that makes sense, and just like I said about if it would have hit one of you with that rock and one of you was hurt or killed, a lot more come. I also think that they know that if they take one or both of you, that again, it's going to be this whole hoopla. But then again, in that area,
big search party.
Yeah. Unless they've seen something like that. I don't know if that's ingrained in them somehow inherently to know this, or I just think that for the most part, they're just creepers and they're opportunists. And they just, I don't know. Maybe they weren't annoyed by you. It's just they saw these nice crappies that you guys had been banking, and you even created this nice little reservoir, and they could just, once you were gone, they could walk right over and have a nice little late night snack.
Yeah.
Oh, I love these encounters, Jeff, and I appreciate you being willing to share. And I promise that if anybody reaches out on any of these, I will be in touch with you and let you know It would be great if somebody came forward and said, "Oh, I saw the girl from The Ring too out on River Road." Like what, whatever it is, like get in touch with me so I can pass it along. That's pretty awesome. Well, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for taking the time on a Saturday, and especially driving in to where you are to do this. I appreciate that so greatly.
Oh, it's been fun.